Hi. So real quick before I ask my question, I do want to tell you guys that your presence here adds immeasurable value to these events, so thank you again for coming.
Thank you.
And my question is a little bit more on the business of writing. In the current very heavily digital landscape, do you think it's easier for a writer to be picked up, or is it more difficult? Is it easier for a writer with an original story, or would it be easier for a writer to slide into a franchise like this one?
Well, I mean, there's certain sort of, legal agreements and stuff like that that make it, I mean, if you're working on a franchise, you're either doing fan fiction, which everybody tolerates until somebody starts making money, and then you have a different issue. Well, it's true. I mean, that's kind of the deal they made. It goes back to, I think it was Lucasfilm, where people were writing fanfic, and originally the lawyers, just being lawyers, were suing the other fans, and they realized that's not a great community outreach. And so they drew the line at, if you're making money on it, then you have to get their permission. Okay? And that's sort of how it works. So you can, but if you're writing characters that other people own, or writing in a world that other people own, you have to have permission, if it's a business proposition, if it's not fanfic. Nevertheless, people liked the familiar. And the middle ground is you take public domain characters and do things with them. You can go write Odysseus to your heart's content and nobody can sue you. It's actually more complicated than that. But I mean, you have to make sure you don't step on somebody else's expression of Odysseus. But, and so that's what you have to decide. There's three ways you can go. You can do something that's totally new and yours, and if things go well, you end up J.K. Rowling. If you can write in somebody else's world, but then you have to have permission, or you can do some middle ground and reinterpret something old, or you can set something in a world that's already been established that's your story, which is another. It's just playing with all that stuff. But once again, you want something a little bit familiar. But sometimes just being in a familiar genre, you're writing a hard-boiled private eye novel, that's your familiar. It has its rules and it has its tropes and stuff like that, and you do that. And you try to bring something unique to it. Like a hard-boiled noir set in a Transformers diner would be different.
I think, because you mentioned the word digital, didn't you, in your question? And
yeah, like Patreon and the blogging.
Yeah, I mean, that's as a distribution, the internet as a distribution network, I think is potentially always very, very valuable, and there's some downsides, but I mean, it's cheaper and easier to get your stuff out there than ever before. There's probably more stories being told for fun and profit than ever before.
Yeah.
You think of the number of, the demand for content has probably never been greater, with the sort of the way the TV landscape looks nowadays, for example. I mean, there's so many competitors there. So yeah, I think a combination of a hunger for stories, new or old, and if you're starting out, the means by which you can get your story seen by a lot of people is easier than before. So, probably the downside of that is it probably doesn't pay as well as it used to do. But I mean, that's not why people get into it initially.
Well, it's harder to get noticed, because if you could get past the gatekeepers in the old days, then you had whole marketing mechanisms behind you that you've got to figure out how to market it yourself, which is why it's good to have a fan network and stuff like that. And that starts with 5 people, and when stuff happens, it happens really fast.
Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.